I never imagined I'd end up in a war with my neighborhood's HOA president, but life has a way of throwing curveballs. My name is Ethan Caldwell, and 2 years ago, I settled into Willow Grove, a picturesque suburb with pristine lawns, charming homes, and an HOA rulebook thicker than a novel. At the helm of this suburban empire was Linda Hargrove, a woman whose name struck fear into every homeowner's heart. Linda wasn't just strict, she was a dictator in a press blazer, her eagle eyes scanning for the slightest infraction. Grass half an inch too tall? Expect a violation notice. Mailbox paint chipped? A fine was already in the mail. Trash cans out past dusk? You'd be slapped with a due law 100 penalty before you could blink. Most of us kept our heads down, hoping to avoid her wrath. But my quiet life unraveled the day I decided to plant a vegetable garden in my backyard. The garden was my pride and joy, a neat patch of tomatoes, zucchini, and herbs tucked discreetly behind my house, hidden from the street. I double-checked the HOA's 52-page handbook. Gardens were allowed if they weren't visible from public areas and were well-maintained. Mine checked both boxes. Or so I thought. One crisp Saturday morning, as I knelt among my tomato plants, a sharp throat-clearing sliced through the air. I turned to see Linda standing at the edge of my yard, her clipboard clutched like a weapon, her blonde bob immobile despite the breeze. Her lips curled into a smirk that screamed trouble. Ethan, this garden violates Section 14, Paragraph 3 of the Community Guidelines, she announced, her voice dripping with condescension, as if I'd been caught smuggling contraband. I stood, brushing dirt from my hands, and forced a smile. Good morning, Linda. I've read the rules. Gardens are fine if they're out of sight from the street and kept tidy. This one's both. Her eyes narrowed, her lips thinning to a razor's edge. I can see it from Mrs. Delaney's second-floor window, which counts as a community vantage point. I couldn't help but laugh, the sound escaping before I could stop it. Linda, you were in someone else's house, peering into my private backyard. That's not what visible from the street means, and you know it. Her face flushed a furious crimson, her composure cracking for a split second. The board will reviewed this at our next meeting, she snapped. You have 48 hours to remove it, or fines will accrue. With that, she spun on her heel and marched off, leaving me staring at my tomatoes, wondering what I'd just unleashed. That moment sparked what I now call the garden rebellion. I refused to tear out my garden. It was compliant, and I wasn't about to let Linda's power trip win. She retaliated with a vengeance, bombarding me with violation notices for the most absurd infractions. My hose was improperly coiled. My doormat was non-regulation. The shade of my fence was ivory instead of snow white. It was harassment, plain and simple, but I held my ground. At the next HOA meeting, I presented my case to the board, a group of mostly reasonable neighbors who agreed my garden followed the rules. The vote was 6-1 in my favor, with Linda as the lone dissenter, her face a mask of barely contained fury. I thought I'd won. I was wrong. A week later, I came home from work to find my water pressure barely a trickle. I checked the faucets, the pipes, everything seemed fine until I reached the outdoor spigot near my garden. The water line was mangled, not broken by age or accident, but deliberately slashed, as if someone had taken a blade to it. I'm a contractor by trade, so I knew what I was looking at. I grabbed my phone, snapped photos, and recorded a video of the damage, my gut telling me this was no coincidence. I called a plumber friend, Greg, who arrived within the hour. He examined the line and shook his head. Ethan, this wasn't an accident. See these cuts? Someone used a sharp tool, maybe a garden trowel or fork. This was intentional. My blood ran cold. I had a suspect, but I needed proof. Without a word to anyone, I installed a discreet security camera system, positioning one to cover the backyard and another aimed at the water line. I didn't breathe a word of it, just waited, my phone set to alert me of any motion. 3 days later, while I was at a job site, my phone pinged. I opened the app and froze. There, in broad daylight, was Linda, decked out in a pristine tennis skirt, clutching a garden fork. She glanced around, her movements furtive, then knelt by the water line and started digging. My jaw dropped. She was sabotaging my property again. I called the police non-emergency line, my voice steady despite my racing pulse. I have live video of my neighbor damaging my water line right now. Can you send an officer? The dispatcher promised a patrol car and took my details. I left work, speeding home, my heart pounding with a mix of anger and disbelief. I pulled into my driveway just as a police cruiser rolled up. Linda was still there, water spraying wildly from the freshly punctured line, soaking her tennis shoes. Her head snapped up as she saw me, then the officer, and her face was a masterpiece of panic, eyes wide, mouth flapping like a stranded fish. She scrambled to her feet, hiding the garden fork behind her back. "Officer, I was just inspecting the irrigation," she chirped, her voice shrill with fake innocence. "As HOA president, I ensure all properties meet code." The officer, a calm man with a no-nonsense air, raised an eyebrow. "Ma'am, damaging private property isn't part of any HOA's authority. The homeowner has video of you tampering with his water line." Linda's facade crumbled. "That's preposterous. This is a misunderstanding," she sputtered, her hands flailing. I pulled out my phone and played the footage, clear as day, Linda digging, stabbing the line, water gushing. I handed the officer photos of the earlier damage and added, "I also have a plumber's statement confirming the first incident was intentional." As Linda watched herself on the screen, her expressions cycled through shock, shame, and raw fury. She opened her mouth, then closed it, her eyes darting like a cornered animal's. The officer snapped his notebook shut. "This looks like criminal mischief, ma'am. That's a crime in this state. I'll need you to come to the station for questioning." Linda's voice hit a piercing octave. "This is outrageous. Do you know who I am? I've run this HOA for 8 years. I'm on the city's planning committee." The officer didn't flinch. "Ma'am, I don't care who you are. The law applies to everyone." He gestured toward the cruiser, and Linda shot me a look of pure venom. "This isn't over, Ethan," she hissed. I met her gaze, unflinching. "Oh, I think it is, Linda." What followed was a whirlwind of police reports, statements, and evidence collection. Linda was charged with criminal mischief, a Class A misdemeanor since the damage to repairs and waterlogged yard totaled $820. The police report hit public records, and Willow Grove's gossip mill churned at light speed. An emergency HOA meeting was called, and despite Linda's tearful pleas, the board voted unanimously to oust her. Her reign was over. At her court hearing, the judge showed no mercy. Linda's defense that she was enforcing HOA standards fell flat. She was sentenced to 6 months probation, ordered to pay $820 in restitution plus a $1,200 fine, and assigned 50 hours of community service. When the gavel fell, Linda's perfectly made-up face collapsed, mascara streaking as she sobbed. "This will ruin my career. I'm in real estate." The judge's voice was ice. "You should have thought of that before you broke the law, Mrs. Hargrove." As I stood in my garden that evening, watering my tomatoes under the setting sun, I felt a strange mix of relief and triumph. Linda's tyranny had crumbled, exposed by her own obsession. Willow Grove was quieter now, the HOA board more reasonable, the neighborhood freer. But I kept my cameras up, just in case. Some battles leave scars, and some enemies never forget.